The old dresser stood silently in the dim room, its worn wood cold under the fingers. An uneasy chill drifted through the air as the clock crept closer to midnight. The faint scent of old paper curling in the heavy stillness. A whisper of a warning brushed the nerves. Do not open the second drawer after midnight. Comment your hour and room like. Subscribe. I told myself it was just an old piece of furniture. I had moved 3 boxes into the room and set a brass ring, grandmother's, on the dresser, as if sealing the place to me. The wood answered to my palm with a cold that sank past skin. The faint must of paper threaded through the air and made my tongue metallic. Light from the hall slanted dull and patient, throwing the dresser's grain into soft, stubborn lines. Through the thin wall, a neighbor's kettle clicked twice, a small domestic percussion that kept time with my hands. There was a nick in the second drawer's face, a shallow crescent like a fingernail gouged in slow. It felt deliberate. I stepped closer. The room cooled a degree, and the warning that had teased my mind since I brought the keys back formed into words on the inside of my skull. Do not open the second drawer after midnight. I told myself the warning was a superstition. I didn't have time, for then I curled my fingers around the edge. My hand met resistance, as if the drawer had weight beyond wood. The metal pull rasped, a jagged sound, and the drawer dragged with the slow complaint of old joints. Close to my ear, the air cooled sharply. A frost glazed the metal pull, and the light above me thinned. A shadow moved beyond the corner of my vision, not a trick of the lamp, but a deliberate slide of something too precise to be chance. I forced the drawer a few inches, and it protested with a long, raw groan. The instant the gap widened, a glove-a-pale hand retracted into darkness, long fingers folding like spent paper, nails pale as bone. It pulled back so fast the sound of its motion cracked the silence like ice. Cold shot through my palm. The brass ring I had left on top skittered, a tiny footfall of metal, and tipped, disappearing with a soft, decisive clink into the drawer's mouth. The drawer's inner darkness swallowed it. I fumbled, and the sound of the metal vanishing felt obscene in the hush. My fingers went straight to the space where the ring had been the skin stuck where the band had sat, and then slid free to find only a pale, wet shine of bloodless warmth. A hairline red line traced my knuckle quick, narrow, then stiffened into a bruise the color of old paper. The cold in the room intensified, not ambient, but focused, like someone exhaling ice through a straw aimed at the drawer. My heartbeat hit a hard, irregular tempo. I pulled back, sending the drawer a half-inch. Closed, it resisted, and then settled with a reluctant sigh that sounded like disappointment. Where the ring had been, there was only the bite of the air and the knowledge of being reached into. The warning at the back of my mind shifted from whisper to fact. I could not claim ignorance anymore. My pulse felt loud in my teeth. The room's light seemed to lean away from the second drawer, as if afraid to look. I should have left. I should have taken my boxes to the living room and not come back. Instead, my fingers found the slit again, and I peered into the dark, hoping to find the ring. The light above wavered, its bulb hummed, and the wood beside the gap radiated a thin, pinprick cold that crawled toward my wrist. When I hooked a finger into the opening, the drawer shivered and slid, nearly closed on its own, catching skin between wood and the inside lip. A sharp sting flared, paper thin and immediate, and when I withdrew my hand, there was a shallow crescent where the drawer had bitten, whit-edged and aching. On the top where id left the ring, a faint smear paler than dust marked the grain, an oval barely wider than a fingertip. The warning had been true, and the lamp shook. I wrapped my injured hand to my chest and backed away, the cold scent of old paper filling my mouth like a secret I could no longer unlearn. The apartment settles into a brittle kind of quiet. As evening stretches thin, the radiator breathes once, low and patient, while the room leans colder around the edges. I tell myself it is just the newness settling, just the wood contracting, the city noise folding away. But the second drawer sits half open like a held breath, and the air that drifts from it smells of old paper and dust, and something sharp that twangs against the back of my tongue. My hand hovers over the worn brass pull, because my fingers remember the warning before my mind does. Do not open the second drawer after midnight. The thought is a stone it sinks, and still I reach, because curiosity tastes like iron, and the clock on the wall slides minutes closer with a sound like a fingernail on glass. When my fingertips find the wood, the temperature shifts under my skin, subtle at first, a coolness that slides up my forearm and sits at the joint of my wrist, as if someone has breathed there. The grain is dry, ridged, and the pull is colder than the rest of the dresser. It seems to drink the warmth from my palm. I press just enough to steady myself. The drawer resists with a thin complaint, a stutter of wood across wood. Beneath that scrubbing sound, something else begins. A dry, distant scratching like a nail dragged along the underside of a lid. It compels me to lean closer. It makes me suck air sharp into my throat, where a metallic aftertaste blooms so quickly it almost causes me to gag. The apartment's light feels thinner, like tissue stretched over a lamp. Shadows pool behind the sofa where they did not exist before. I cannot withdraw my hand. The pulse beneath the wood is not mine. The pull at my wrist comes without warning, sudden enough to tear out a breath. It is an animal, precise and violent. My forearm yanked toward the gap with a force that rattles bone and ligaments, and whatever was loose on my wrist is flung from me. My watch, the one with the scuffed face, spins once in air and vanishes beneath the dresser with a hollow clack that knocks the room's rhythm offbeat. The scratching crescendos into a whisper pressed to my ear, syllables too small to parse, but full of intent. And then, for a second that carves the seconds into a toothy edge, something presses its mouth to my collar, and inhales very slow. I feel the pressure of breath, cold and wet, along the hollow of my throat. A single bright panic spark of pain blooms where the strap bit into my skin, the mark of a quick, clean abrasion. And when I look, there is a pale ring, raw and stinging, already starting to bruise. The serenity leaves me shaking. The whisper recedes like teeth withdrawing. Below me, the watch ticks no more. For a moment, the room is too loud. The hum of the refrigerator, a high insect whine, my own pulse like a drum in my ears. Then the world reshapes itself into an absence. The scratching stops as abruptly as it started, and the drawer leans further open on its own. A slow, measured slide that leaves me frozen with my palm clamped to the edge. The air that pours out now is thicker with dust. It tastes of old paper and pennies, and the lingering copper tang of that earlier alarm. I try to pull back, and the skin where the strap gripped me tingles with cold. The space beneath the dresser where my watch fled is dark enough that my hand disappears into it like a swallowed thing. I reach, fingers scrabbling against a floor that smells faintly of damp wood, and something else, like bruised fruit. My fingertips brush metal, then nothing. When I draw my hand out, I am holding only a sliver of something black, a thread-like filament that sticks between my fingers and gives like a pulse. The filament is cold, thin, and impossible to map. It leaves a smear of powdery residue on my skin that flakes. When I breathe, there is a rational ladder of steps I could climb, retrieve the watch with a flashlight, screw the drawer shut, call someone. But the abrasion around my wrist burns and smokes in a way that makes the simple act of thinking feel intimate and dangerous. The air compresses. The apartment's temperature drops 2 whole degrees in a matter of breaths, and my chest tightens as if something has folded over it. A whisper curls against my ear again, closer, and this time I actually hear a word, fragmented, like someone learning to enunciate through a mouthful of cloth. It is not an order, it is a counting. The syllable lands on the dark between my ribs and bones the pace of a clock. 4. My watch is gone, and the room has shortened. Midnight steals nearer, not by minutes, but in moments that snap like brittle twine. I can feel the rules of the place rearranging themselves around the fact that I touched the drawer. I sit on the edge of the bed, and the duvet is thin and lukewarm against my palms, an inadequate barrier. My wrist pulses with a pale ache and a heat I cannot soothe. Beneath the dresser, the darkness seems to breathe in time with the radiator. The faint sound of rubbing returns, less a scratch now, and more of something patient, rubbing an old wound. The smell of dust thickens into the scent of cold metal and old books, as if pages are waiting to be opened by teeth. I realize, with a slow, sinking clarity, that I have a piece of whatever lives in that gap clinging to me, and that loss, my watch, my small anchor to ordinary time, is a chasm I cannot mend. I press the tender skin of my wrist and find a crescent of frost on the surface that melts against my thumb into saline warmth. The rule is no longer theoretical. It is embodied on me in tender, bruised blue letters. If this has you listening in the dark, tell me in the comments where. And when you're hearing this, say the hour and the room, and I will know you are awake with me. The sound of my own voice is too loud after that it rebounds off the walls and the drawer. And in the echo, I hear another sound, softer now, like thread being pulled through bone. I fold my hands around the bruised place and wait as the apartment breathes out and in, counting each intake as if it were a second carved from the mattress. The drawer remains half opened, an ungiving mouth. Outside, traffic murmurs like a distant ocean. Inside, the thing behind the wood counts the time, and with every number the air grows colder, and with every number the space in my chest grows smaller. I sit at the edge of the mattress, the cheap lamp spattering weak light across the dresser. Moonlight comes through blinds in ribbons, dust motes floating like slow static, and the air is colder than the rest of the apartment, an ache under my clavicles. I have taken coffee, paced the kitchen, told myself stories, but the dresser keeps occupying the corner of my vision. Its grain, a seam in the wood dark as an old bruise. The second drawer breathes against the night, a weight that bends the room's temperature with it. Every inhale I take feels thicker afterward, as if something else is inhaling in the dark. I set a recording on my phone, because watching feels different from listening. Screens are proof, I tell myself, but the battery reads 70%, and the timestamp blinks forward. Staying is a decision that changes me. I am no longer an accidental tenant. By choosing to stay awake, I lock myself into its rhythm. Colder, closer, counting time by the cadence of my own breath. The drawer moves slow the way a memory does when it surfaces. No force, only inevitability. A thin line of black divides the wood, and widens. Cool air spills out, carrying a dry, papery scent and a metallic tang that lays across the back of my tongue. Threads are there, a tangle like hair or string, not fabric but fibrous and slick, blue-black under the wavering lamplight, and they pulse with a rhythm that matches the small thud in my throat. Reaching for the knob feels like pressing my palm to ice the oak bites, and my skin prickles with static. One strand slides up and brushes my wrist. Cool as river silt, it leaves a powdery ash across my skin, and something like a syllable pressed into the hollow of my throat. The room answers that touch. The lamp hums a note I can feel behind my teeth, and the air grows thinner, as though the night is drawing closer along a cord anchored to that drawer. I think about pulling them free to prove what they are, curiosity sharp enough to be dangerous. Before my fingers close, the threads inhale, and an exhale comes from deep inside the chest of the dresser, a rasp that tastes like old coins. The sound breaks me into motion. I lunge forward, and the drawer snaps shut with a force that jars my bones and sends the lamp's bulb shattering into a hot rain. Glass stings my palms, and the light goes with it, throwing the room into a wet, immediate dark that smells of ozone and chilled metal. Something hooks into the cuff of my shirt, cold, deliberate, and I feel the tug as if a sickle has taken the measure of my arm. The strap of my watch catches on splintered wood and rips the face spins and dies at 29 minutes past midnight. No clock, no proof. The drawer is closed, and I am left with the thin, iron taste of fear, my skin buzzing where the thread held, a raw circle of numbness that will not fade on my knees, breathing loud and jagged. I fumble for the phone and find only black glass the recording saved, but the play icon grayed out, an empty promise. The room's temperature has shifted from cold to something subterranean. Each breath pulls a sliver of winter down into my ribs. I press both palms to the dresser's face, and the wood is not cold so much as patient, like stone that has waited an impossibly long time beneath my fingers. The grain seems to pulse once, slow as a dying heart. In that pulse, I understand an economy. The drawer gives and it takes, and the taking is precise. I cannot get back the lamp, the watch, the handful of minutes now severed from my night. When the light returns, when a neighbor's distant TV blinks through the slats, there is no tangle in sight, only an empty seam and a faint dusting of powder where the thread brushed me. Yet I feel its hold, a tiny tether beneath my skin, a cold that hums when I breathe. The knowledge roots like a seed. Whatever lives under that rim counts hours by the things it steals. I rise with my joints old and noisy, and know, with a clarity that will not be undone, that this is not over. When I glance once more, the drawer's seam seems to breathe out my name in tiny vapor. Morning comes thin as paper, a pale strip across the floorboards. The second drawer is closed, and I can feel the room's memory of cold, a low, persistent chill that rides along my spine like a stray threat. Dust motes hang in the light, and a metallic taste sits heavy under my tongue when I lift the dresser's lip. It doesn't give. The wood is colder than the air. My fingers find only a smooth, stubborn seam. Something is gone from the top my lighter, the one with the chipped enamel. Nowhere where I left it, and that small absence pockets the room into a new kind of silence. I press my thumb to the grain, and it comes away faintly gray, as if the wood has been trying to memorize me. I crouch to peer beneath the dresser, and my knees grow damp on the cold floor. There, tucked under the underside, is paper, brittle, dust-sanded, smelling of old glue and rooms that have stood too long. I fold it open with careful fingers, and the ink is faint, as if spoken years ago and then erased. 3 simple words sit in the center, the same admonition burned through the night. Do not open the second drawer after midnight. The twist, soft and quiet as breath, is in the loop of the final letter. The handwriting is mine. My wrist stings where the skin remembers the drawer's edge. Reading my own scrawl undoes the distance between then and now. That knowledge shifts the rules. This is not only a warning for me, it is a warning from me. Suddenly, the room thickens, sounds sharpen. The clock's ticking, folding into the floorboards. Heat drains from my arms with a slow, clinical chill, and the room rearranges itself into a list of losses. The dresser's surface holds a smear of something blue-black in the varnish, a smear that matches the smudge on the note. And when I wipe it with the pad of my finger, the varnish takes my fingerprint, but keeps it, as if varnish and skin have agreed to remember each other. I slide my palm along the wood, and a sting blooms under my nail, tiny and sharp, as if the edge of the drawer has left a claim. My heart knocks a staccato against my ribs, leaving feels impossible in the way a door you thought open slides quietly closed. I push open the front door, and the corridor greets me with a low, unoiled hum. The building's fluorescent tubes flicker with a heartbeat not its own. My breath is too loud, a fast, shallow tide that counts off in thinned gasps, because the hallway keeps the room's hush and will not let it go. I walk down the hall, my shoes scuff grit that tastes like iron when I press my tongue to the roof of my mouth. Doors stand like mouths, one is cracked, and a sliver of dark smells of dust and sleep. My keys weigh heavier when I try to turn the stairwell lock. The cylinder grinds and refuses. For the first time, the rules show teeth. The world beyond the dresser is not entirely mine. I feel, with a slow, sinking certainty, that the exchange is not over. Something kept a part of me by the drawer and will not let me go until it has been paid in quiet currency. I step back until the light from the window tilts the room into long, thin shadows. For a moment, I think I've resolved it. One final look, and I will close this chapter like a door. But the dresser answers in its own quiet way. A handprint, pale and cooling, is feathering itself into the top board, not full, not forceful, just an impression that seeps like ink into paper, into the grain. It is my hand. The shape of my fingers matches the scar on my knuckle, the angle of my thumb, the way I hold a cup. As that print sinks, the air around me folds into colder silence, and the note's words unspool into a rule I cannot unlearn. The house exhales, and the smell of old paper curls in the space between my teeth. A single sunray shaves the dust, and even the air holds itself like a secret now. A handprint slowly fading into the wood's grain, a final, stubborn signature beneath the surface. If you felt this room breathe with me tonight, tell me where and when you were listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.